They came to invade, but humanity's soldiers were ready for war. Part 1: First Contact. The warships came out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning. One moment the sky was clear and blue. The next moment, massive crystal ships blocked out the sun over 3 continents. People stopped in the streets. Cars crashed into each other. Children pointed at the sky and asked their parents what those strange shapes were. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked down at the small blue planet below. He had done this 17 times before. 17 different worlds. 17 easy victories. His people were the greatest conquerors in the galaxy. They had never lost a single warship in battle. "Scan the planet," ordered. His voice was calm, almost bored. His officers worked quickly. Numbers and images appeared on the crystal screens around the bridge, studied them with his 4 eyes. He saw cities with primitive buildings. He saw vehicles that moved on wheels instead of hovering. He saw aircraft that could barely reach the edge of space. He saw satellites that looked like toys compared to technology. "They are children," said to his second-in-command, a female named. "They have only had space travel for less than 100 years. This will be quick." Nodded her long neck. "Should we send the surrender demand, Admiral?" "Yes, the usual message. Surrender or die. Give them 1 hour to respond." The message went out to every screen, every radio, every device on the planet below. The people of Earth saw the face of Admiral for the first time. His gray skin, his 4 yellow eyes, his mouth full of sharp teeth. He spoke in a language they did not understand, but the translation appeared below his face. "People of this world, you are now part of the Dominion. You will surrender your leaders to us. You will give us control of your resources. You will serve the Dominion. If you do not surrender in 1 hour, we will destroy your military forces and take what we want. There is no escape. There is no hope. Submit." All around the world, people panicked. Some ran to their homes. Some fell to their knees and prayed. Some grabbed weapons and ran into the streets, ready to fight. Governments called emergency meetings. Military leaders shouted orders. News channels showed the alien ships from every angle. But deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a bunker that did not appear on any map, something different was happening. General sat in a command chair surrounded by screens and officers. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray hair cut short. Her uniform had no country's flag on it. Instead, it showed a simple symbol, a blue circle with a sword through it, the symbol of the United Earth Defense Council. Had waited her whole life for this day. Her mother had waited before her, and her grandfather before that. 3 generations of her family had commanded this secret organization. 3 generations had prepared for the moment when aliens would come to Earth. "Report," said. Her voice was steady. 17 ships in orbit, General," said Colonel Park, her intelligence officer. "Crystal hull composition matches the Roswell sample. This is them." The nodded slowly. In 1947, a small scout ship had crashed in the American desert. The world had been told it was a weather balloon, but the truth was much bigger. Scientists had studied that crashed ship for decades. They had learned its secrets. They had built new weapons, new shields, new technology that the rest of the world never knew about. "They think we are primitive," said. "They think we have never seen their kind before." "Yes, General. Their communication suggests they expect surrender within the hour." Allowed herself a small smile. "Let them think that for now." She pressed a button on her chair. All around the world, in bunkers and bases hidden underground, lights turned from red to green. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives received orders they had memorized since their first day in service. Weapons that had never been fired in combat were powered up. Shields that had never been tested against a real enemy hummed to life. "Activate Protocol 0, said. "Wake the sleeping giants." In the American Midwest, farmers left their fields and walked into barns that hid elevators to underground bunkers. In the mountains of Norway, Fishermen opened secret compartments in their boats and pulled out plasma rifles. In the deserts of North Africa, sand dunes slid apart to reveal missile batteries pointed at the sky. In the forests of Russia, trees that were not really trees unfolded into sensor towers. For 70 years, humanity had prepared in secret. Every major country had been part of it. The Cold War, the space race, even some of the smaller conflicts had all been covers for the real work. Building, training, waiting. Now the waiting was over. Admiral watched his timer count down, 50 minutes until the deadline. He expected messengers from the planet's government soon. They always sent messengers, begging for mercy, offering to cooperate, crying about their families and their children. Admiral, one of his officers, said, "Something strange." "What is it?" "The population centers. The thermal readings are changing." Looked at the screen. His 4 eyes went wide. Millions of heat signatures were disappearing from the cities below, not dying, just vanishing, moving somewhere his sensors could not see. "Where are they going?" he demanded. No one had an answer. On the planet below, General watched her screens with calm eyes. Cities were emptying into underground shelters. Military forces were moving into position. The great machine that humanity had built in secret was finally beginning to move. "General," Colonel Park said, "the enemy is sending landing forces, 12 drop ships heading for North America." "Good," said, "let them land, let them think they are winning." She stood up from her chair and looked at the officers around her. Men and women from every country on Earth, all of them wearing the same uniform, all of them ready to fight. 70 years ago, our grandparents found a crashed alien ship. They knew that one day the owners would come looking for us. They knew we would have to fight, so they prepared. They built weapons. They trained soldiers. They created this organization, and they passed it down to us. She turned to face the main screen, where the alien ships hung in orbit like crystal monsters. "Today we show the galaxy what humanity can do. Today we fight, and today we win." The first drop ships entered Earth's atmosphere, their crystal hulls glowing with heat. Commander watched the ground rush up toward him and smiled with all 3 rows of teeth. Another easy conquest, another primitive world to add to the dominion. He did not know that he was flying straight into a trap. They came to invade, but humanity's soldiers were ready for war. Part 2: The Trap Springs. The drop ships landed in a wheat field in Kansas. Commander stepped out first, his armored boots crushing the golden stalks beneath him. Behind him, 500 of the Dominion's finest soldiers followed. They carried plasma weapons. They wore armor that could stop any bullet. They had conquered a dozen worlds together. But something felt wrong. Looked around with his 4 eyes. The land was flat and empty. A farmhouse stood in the distance. A dirt road led toward a small town. Everything looked peaceful, too peaceful. "Where are the people?" asked his second-in-command, a young officer named. Checked his scanner. An hour ago, this area had shown thousands of life signs. Farms full of families, towns full of workers. Now there was nothing. The readings showed only his own soldiers and the endless fields of wheat. "They are hiding," said. "Primitive species always hide when we arrive. They will come out when they realize resistance is useless." He ordered his forces to march toward the town. The soldiers moved in perfect formation, their weapons ready. The wheat bent and broke under their feet. The sun shone down from a clear blue sky. Birds flew overhead, singing their simple songs. Had fought on many worlds. He knew the feeling of walking into danger. He had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct in his body was screaming at him. "Stop," he said suddenly. His soldiers froze. "Something is wrong, I can feel it." Looked around nervously. "Commander, I see nothing. The sensors show nothing. Perhaps you are being too careful." Opened his mouth to respond. He never got the chance. The first shot came from below the ground. A metal rod moving faster than any bullet punched through the lead vehicle's shields like they were made of paper. The vehicle exploded in a ball of blue fire. Before the sound even reached its ears, 3 more shots followed. 3 more vehicles died. Ambush screamed. The ground itself seemed to come alive. Hidden doors opened in the wheat fields, revealing concrete bunkers packed with human soldiers. Weapons that had never seen before rose from underground silos. Missiles streaked into the sky, heading for the remaining dropships. The soldiers returned fire instantly. Their plasma weapons filled the air with deadly green light. But the human soldiers wore strange armor that seemed to absorb the plasma. They fired back with weapons that shot solid metal at incredible speeds. Soldiers began to fall. In orbit, Admiral watched the disaster unfold. His screens showed confusion and fire. He heard the screams of his soldiers through the communication channels. This was impossible. This primitive species could not have weapons like this. They were supposed to be simple, weak, easy to conquer. "What is happening down there?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "The humans have weapons that are not in our database. Their armor is blocking our plasma. Our forces are taking heavy losses." Slammed his fist on his command chair. "Send reinforcements, orbital bombardment on the enemy positions." "Yes, Admiral." 3 more dropships launched from the fleet. At the same time, the flagship's main guns powered up. Would teach these humans what happened to species that resisted the Dominion. But before the guns could fire, something unexpected happened. From the ocean below, dozens of missiles rose into the sky. They moved faster than anything had ever seen. His point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but they were too fast, too many. The missiles struck his bombardment satellites one by one, turning them into clouds of debris. Hal whispered. Then the real surprise came. The primitive satellites that had dismissed as simple communication devices began to unfold. Hidden panels opened. Weapons emerged. In seconds, the humans had turned their worthless space junk into a ring of weapon platforms surrounding his fleet. The platforms opened fire. Energy beams that matched technology cut into his smaller ships. 2 cruisers exploded before his officers could even respond. "They have our technology," said. Her voice shook with something had never heard from her before. "Fear. They have been hiding it. All this time they have been hiding." Stared at the screens showing his dying ships, his dying soldiers. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had never lost a single battle. Now, against a species he had considered primitive, he was losing. On the ground, Commander fought for his life. Half his soldiers were dead. The humans kept coming from everywhere, rising from the ground like ghosts. Their weapons never stopped firing. Their soldiers never stopped advancing. A human voice suddenly filled all communication channels. It was calm and clear, speaking in perfect language. "This is General of the United Earth Defense Council. We have been watching your people for 70 years, Admiral. We know how you fight. We know how you think. We have been preparing for this day since before most of your soldiers were born." Listened in shock. How did they learn his language? How did they know so much about his people? "You came to conquer a primitive world," the voice continued. "You expected easy prey, but Earth is not prey. Earth fights back. This is your only warning. Leave now and we will let you go. Stay and we will destroy every ship in your fleet." For a long moment there was silence. Looked at the screens. The screens showed fire and death. "Admiral," said quietly, "perhaps we should consider her offer." His 4 eyes narrowed. His pride burned hot in his chest. They had never retreated, never surrendered. He would not be the first. "No," he said. "Send word to Dominion Command. Request reinforcements, all available battle groups. I want enough ships to glass this entire planet." Nodded slowly. "Yes, Admiral. The message will take 3 days to reach command, 3 more days for reinforcements to arrive." Then we hold position for 6 days, said. We pull back our ground forces. We stay in orbit. And when reinforcements arrive, we will make these humans pay for every life they have taken. On the ground, Commander received the retreat order. He had started with 500 soldiers. He had less than 200 left. As his surviving forces ran for the remaining drop ships, looked back at the battlefield. Human soldiers stood among the broken vehicles. They did not chase the retreating enemy. They simply watched. One of them, a young woman with a bloody face and burning eyes, raised her hand in a gesture did not understand. A wave, a farewell. Or perhaps a promise. We will see you again soon. In her bunker beneath the Alps, General received reports from around the world. Every landing force had been destroyed or driven back. Human losses were high, but nowhere near as high as they could have been. The first battle was over. But the war was just beginning. They are calling for reinforcements, Colonel Park reported. We intercepted the message. More ships are coming, many more. Nodded, she had expected this. They were too proud to accept defeat. They would throw everything they had at Earth. How long, she asked. 6 days. Stood up and walked to the main screen. The fleet still hung in orbit, wounded but dangerous. Beyond them, somewhere in the darkness of space, more enemies were coming. 6 days, she repeated. Then we show them what humanity is truly capable of. They came to invade, but humanity's soldiers were ready for war. Part 3, The Weight of History. Private James sat in a ruined farmhouse, cleaning his plasma rifle. Around him, other soldiers rested and ate and checked their equipment. They had fought for 12 hours straight. They had won, but they all knew more fighting was coming. James looked at his weapon. It was beautiful in a strange way. The metal glowed faintly blue. The power cell hummed with energy. His grandfather had helped design this rifle. His grandmother had helped build the first prototype. 3 generations of his family had worked on weapons they hoped would never be needed. Now those weapons were keeping humanity alive. Private, his sergeant called. Command wants you for a broadcast, something about morale for the civilians. James nodded and stood up. He was young, only 22, but he had been training for war since he was 6 years old. His whole life had been preparation for this moment. Sometimes he wondered what it would have been like to be normal, to worry about jobs and relationships and ordinary problems. But he never wondered for long. He had a purpose, a mission, and now that mission was here. The broadcast station was in the basement of the farmhouse. A woman with a camera pointed it at James while an officer asked him questions. James talked about his family, about the secret history they had been part of for 70 years. It had started in 1947. A scout ship had crashed in the New Mexico desert. The American government had recovered it and hidden it away. Scientists had studied the wreckage for years, slowly learning its secrets. They discovered that the ship had come from a vast empire that conquered weaker species. They realized that one day more ships would come. So they began to prepare. At first, only America knew the truth, but secrets this big were hard to keep. By 1960, the Soviet Union had learned about the alien ship. Instead of fighting over it, the 2 superpowers made a secret agreement. They would compete publicly, racing to the moon and building nuclear weapons. But privately, they would work together on the real threat. The Cold War had been a cover. The space race had been a cover. Even some of the smaller wars had been covers, testing new weapons and training new soldiers for the day when aliens would arrive. My grandfather was one of the first scientists at Area 51, James said to the camera. He spent 40 years studying alien technology. He never saw the sun. He never took a vacation. He gave his whole life to keep Earth safe. And now, because of him and people like him, we have a chance. All around the world, similar stories were being told. The secret was finally out. Civilians learned why their taxes had been so high, why their governments had seemed so secretive, why strange facilities had been built in remote locations. Everything had been for this moment. In Norway, a fisherman named told reporters about his grandfather's boat. It looked like an ordinary fishing vessel, but hidden inside were torpedo tubes and missile launchers. His family had maintained the weapons for 60 years, passing the responsibility from father to son. In Ukraine, a farmer named Olna showed cameras the grain silo on her land. It was not really a grain silo. It was an anti-orbital battery capable of shooting down ships in space. Her grandmother had been one of the engineers who built it. Her mother had been one of the soldiers who guarded it. Now Olna fired it at enemies from the stars. In Tibet, an old monk named revealed the truth about his monastery. For centuries, people had thought it was a place of prayer and meditation. But for the last 50 years, it had also been a training center for fighter pilots. The caves beneath the mountains hid aircraft that could fly to the edge of space. The world learned that humanity had been united in secret for longer than anyone had known. Countries that publicly fought each other had privately worked together. Scientists who were supposed to be rivals had shared their discoveries. Soldiers from enemy nations had trained side by side. All for this moment, all for this war. General watched the broadcast from her command center. She saw the faces of ordinary people learning the truth. Some were angry, some were scared, but most were something else, something that made her heart swell with pride. They were determined. In cities around the world, civilians volunteered to help. They donated blood. They carried supplies. They helped build defenses. They were not soldiers, but they were part of the fight. General Colonel Park said, "We have a problem." Turned away from the broadcasts. What is it? They are adapting. They are studying our tactics from the first battle. Their next attack will be different. Nodded, she had expected this. They had not conquered 17 star systems by being stupid. They learned from their mistakes. What else? Their reinforcements will arrive in 4 days. 3 full battle groups, over 100 warships. Felt her stomach tighten. Humanity's secret weapons had given them an advantage in the first battle, but they had used many of their surprises. They had revealed many of their secrets. The next battle would be different. How many of our orbital platforms survived? She asked. 60%, but the enemy knows about them now. They will target them first in the next attack. And our ground forces? We lost 20,000 soldiers in the first battle. We have reserves, but not enough to replace them all. Closed her eyes. 20,000 people, 20,000 families who would get terrible news, 20,000 empty chairs at dinner tables around the world. But there was no time for grief. The enemy was still coming. Begin Phase 2 preparations, she ordered. Move all civilians to the deep shelters, activate the reserve forces, and contact the Ghost Fleet. Colonel Park's eyes widened. The Ghost Fleet? General, those ships are experimental. They have never been tested in combat. Everything was experimental once, said. Those ships are humanity's best hope. It is time for them to fly. Somewhere in the asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks and dust, lights began to flicker on. Engines that had been cold for years began to warm up. Crews that had been waiting in frozen sleep began to wake. Humanity's secret space navy, built over decades from stolen alien technology, was finally ready to fight. On Earth, Private James finished his broadcast and walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. Then he looked up and saw the ships, tiny dots of light against the darkening sky. They were still there, still waiting. James checked his plasma rifle one more time. His grandfather had designed this weapon. His grandmother had built it. His parents had tested it. Now James would use it to defend his home. The history of humanity's preparation stretched back 70 years, but the future would be decided in the next 4 days, and James intended to be part of it. They came to invade, but humanity's soldiers were ready for war. Part 4, Darkest Hour. The reinforcements arrived 2 days early. Admiral watched his screens as ship after ship emerged from fold space. 3 battle groups, 112 warships, more firepower than any primitive species had ever faced. "Now," said his voice cold with anger, "we finish this." The attack came from everywhere at once. Ships spread out around the planet, targeting every orbital platform, every surface installation, every hidden base they had discovered. The sky lit up with weapons fire. The ground shook with explosions. General stood in her command center, watching the destruction. The Ghost Fleet had risen from the asteroid belt to meet the enemy. 23 ships, built in secret over 40 years. They fought bravely, but against 100 warships, bravery was not enough. "We lost the Moscow platform," an officer reported. "The Beijing platform is damaged. The Ghost Fleet is down to 11 ships." Gripped the edge of her command table, her knuckles turned white. "Continue firing, do not give up." On the ground, the situation was even worse. Landing forces hit every continent at once. This time, they did not walk into traps. They burned everything from orbit before landing. Bunkers that had taken decades to build were cracked open in hours. Soldiers who had trained their whole lives were killed in seconds. Private James fought in the ruins of what had been Denver. His unit had started with 100 soldiers. Now there were 32 left. They hid in the rubble of a collapsed building, taking shots at passing patrols. "We need to fall back," Sergeant said. Her voice was tired, her armor was cracked. Blood ran down her face from a wound on her forehead. "There is nothing left to defend here." James looked at the city around him. Fires burned everywhere. Bodies lay in the streets. The beautiful mountain view was hidden behind smoke and dust. "Where do we fall back to?" he asked. Had no answer. In orbit, the Ghost Fleet made its last stand. Captain Sarah commanded one of the surviving ships, a small destroyer called the Defiance. She watched as her sister ships exploded one by one. There were too many, too strong. "Captain," her pilot said, "we have lost engines. Weapons are offline. We are dead in space." Looked at her crew. They were young, scared, but they had not given up. "Then we ram them," she said. "Set a collision course for the nearest enemy ship. If we are going to die, we take some of them with us." The pilot nodded and began to work the controls. But before the Defiance could move, a cruiser opened fire. The ship shook. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Then darkness. Woke up in an escape pod floating through the battle. She watched through a tiny window as the Defiance broke apart and fell toward Earth. Her ship was gone. Her crew was gone. Everything was gone. On the ground, General faced the worst decision of her life. "The enemy has taken 60% of our surface installations," Colonel Park reported. "Our orbital defenses are destroyed. The Ghost Fleet is gone. We have lost contact with most of our ground forces." Stared at the map on her screen. Red marks covered almost every continent. They were winning. Everything humanity had built, everything generations had prepared, was being destroyed. "What options do we have left?" she asked. Park hesitated. Then he pulled up a file marked with a black border. The file that no one wanted to open. The file that contained humanity's last resort. "Operation Hellfire," Park said quietly. "The fusion charges." Closed her eyes. She knew about the charges. Every major landing zone had them buried deep underground. Enough explosive power to create earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. Enough destruction to make parts of Earth uninhabitable for centuries. If she gave the order, they would die. But so would billions of humans. Civilization would collapse. Humanity might survive as a species, but everything they had built would be gone. "Is there any other option?" she asked. "No, General. Either we use the charges or we lose the war." Thought about her mother, her grandfather, all the generations that had prepared for this moment. Had they built those weapons knowing someone might have to use them? Had they accepted that price? She opened her mouth to give the order. Then she stopped. General, Park asked, "What is it?" Looked at the screen again. Something had changed. The advance had slowed in several areas. Reports were coming in from the front lines. Strange reports. "The enemy is hesitating," an officer said. "Some of their units have stopped attacking." Frowned. Why? No one knew. But somewhere on the other side of the world, Captain Sarah was about to find out. Escape pod had landed in a field in Poland. She crawled out, injured and alone, expecting to die. Instead, she found herself surrounded by soldiers. They did not kill her. They took her to their base camp, and there saw something she did not expect. The soldiers were tired, wounded, confused. They sat in groups talking quietly. Some of them cried, others stared at nothing, their four eyes empty and sad. An officer approached her, recognized the marks on his armor. This was Commander, the same one who had led the first attack. "You fight well," said. His voice was rough, exhausted. "Better than any species we have ever faced." "And yet you are winning," said. Looked at his soldiers, at the fires burning around the camp, at the sky full of death. "Are we?" he asked. "We have lost more soldiers in 3 days than we lost in the last 10 conquests combined. Our ships are damaged, our crews are exhausted. And for what? A planet full of people who would rather die than surrender." Watched his face. She saw something she recognized, the look of a soldier who had seen too much death. "What do you want?" she asked. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "I want to stop fighting. I want to go home. But I cannot do that without something to show my admiral, some reason to retreat that does not look like defeat." Felt her heart begin to beat faster. An idea formed in her mind. A crazy idea, an impossible idea. But in the darkest hour, sometimes impossible ideas are the only ones worth trying. "Take me to your admiral," she said. "I have an offer for him." They came to invade, but humanity's soldiers were ready for war. Part 5: The Human Factor. Captain Sarah stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, surrounded by enemies. Admiral sat in his command chair, his 4 eyes studying her with cold interest. A dozen officers watched from the edges of the room. One wrong word and would die. But she was not afraid. She had already lost everything, her ship, her crew. Her world was burning below. There was nothing left to fear. "You asked to speak with me," said. "I allowed it because Commander insisted. He says you have an offer. Speak quickly. My patience is limited." Took a deep breath. She had only one chance to get this right. 70 years ago, a ship crashed on our planet," she began. "One of your scout ships. We recovered it, we studied it, we learned many things." Leaned forward slightly. "We know this. That is why you have weapons that can hurt us." "Yes, but we learned more than weapons, Admiral. We learned about your enemies." The room went very quiet. 4 eyes narrowed. "What do you know about our enemies?" Smiled. "We know about the Collective. We know they destroyed 3 of your colonies last century. We know you fear them more than anything in the galaxy. And we know where their main fleet is hidden." Stood up so fast that his officers jumped back in surprise. "You are lying." "I am not." The pilot of the crashed ship left records, star charts, military reports. He was running from an attack when he crashed on our world. His ship's computer had everything he knew about them. Walked toward until he stood right in front of her. He was tall. His teeth were sharp. His breath smelled like copper and acid. "Why would you tell me this?" he demanded. "We are your enemies. We are destroying your world." "Because I want you to stop," said simply. "I am offering you a trade. Leave our planet, take your ships and go. In return, we will give you everything we know about their locations, their weaknesses, their plans." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You expect me to retreat. They have never retreated. We have never lost a war." You have never fought a species like us, said. You have conquered 17 worlds. We have fought each other for 10,000 years. War is in our blood. It is how we solve problems. It is how we survive. She pointed at the screens showing the battle below. You are winning now, but look at the cost. How many soldiers have you lost? How many ships? And we are still fighting. Every city you take, we destroy. Every base you capture, we burn. You can conquer this planet, Admiral, but there will be nothing left when you finish. Nothing but ashes and graves. Did not answer. He turned to look at the screen, saw something change in his eyes. Doubt, weariness. Even if we leave, he said slowly, you will still be a threat. You will rebuild. You will come for us. Maybe, admitted. Or maybe we will become allies. They are enemies to both of us. Together we could destroy them. Separately they will destroy us both. Was quiet for a very long time. Around the room his officers whispered to each other. Some looked angry, others looked relieved. Finally turned back to. I need proof, he said. Proof that you really have this information about the. Nodded, she had prepared for this. From her pocket she pulled a small data chip. It contained only a tiny portion of the intelligence they had recovered, but it was enough to prove her point. Took the chip and gave it to his tactical officer. Minutes passed. The officer's face changed as he read the data. When he looked up, his 4 eyes were wide with shock. Admiral, he said, this information is genuine. It includes the locations of 3 staging bases. If this is accurate, we could cripple their fleet before they attack us again. Closed his eyes. Could see the battle happening inside him, pride against wisdom, glory against survival. When he opened his eyes again, the battle was over. Stop the attack, he ordered. All forces stop the attack. The bridge exploded with activity. Officers shouted orders. Communications went out to every ship. Slowly, the weapons fire stopped. The landing forces paused. The sky grew quiet. On Earth, General watched her screens in disbelief. The enemy had stopped. For the first time in 3 days, nothing was exploding. What is happening? She asked. We do not know, General, Colonel Park said, but they are pulling back. 3 weeks later, the last ship folded out of the solar system. They left behind a ruined planet. Millions were dead. Cities were destroyed. The scars of war covered every continent. But humanity had survived. General stood in the ruins of her command center, watching the alien ships disappear. Captain stood beside her, wearing a uniform that was more patches than cloth. You saved us, said quietly. What you did up there on their ship that took more courage than any battle. Shook her head. I just saw an opportunity. The real courage belongs to everyone who fought, everyone who prepared, everyone who refused to give up. Looked up at the sky. The stars were visible now, brighter than ever without the smoke and fire. They will be back, she said. Or something else. Now that the galaxy knows we exist, they will keep coming. Then we will be ready, said. That is what we do. That is what being human means. All around the world, people emerged from shelters and bunkers. They looked at the destruction around them. They cried for the dead. They held their families close. Then they began to rebuild. In Kansas, Private James helped clear rubble from a collapsed building. His plasma rifle was broken. His armor was ruined. But he was alive, and his world was still free. In Norway, the fisherman took his boat out to sea. The hidden weapons were empty now, but he would refill them. He would pass the responsibility to his children, just as his grandfather had passed it to him. In Tibet, the monk repaired the monastery's meditation hall. Deep below, engineers were already building new fighter planes. Humanity had been tested, humanity had suffered, but humanity had won. General walked to a platform overlooking the Swiss mountains. The sun was rising, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. General, Colonel Park called from behind her. We are receiving a transmission. from deep space. Turned around, No, someone else. A species we have never contacted before. They say they watched our war. They say they want to talk. Felt a smile spread across her face. The galaxy was full of mysteries, full of dangers, full of possibilities. And humanity was finally ready to face them all. She straightened her uniform and walked toward the communication center. A new chapter was beginning. Whatever came next, her people would meet it the same way they had met together, prepared, unbroken. That was the human way.